Job description provides salary between $90,000 and $110,000, but interview manager is flabbergasted when I asked for $100,000. Companies nowadays are a joke. I recently applied for an account executive job with a job description that offers salary between $90,000 and $110,000, and when asked about salary expectations in the interview I give them a medium. The hiring manager acts surprised with my offer even when my credentials are outstanding. I did this because I know these idiots aren't going to stick to their word, as almost 90% of these companies lie in their description, and I'm hoping for one that actually has a moral compass. There is absolutely no merit in being an honest job seeker. Companies are lying in their job descriptions, and their hiring personnel act like people who apply should never see that money they posted and lied about. I don't see a reason not to lie about your credentials when all they do is lie about the jobs they post. Edit, to answer some questions and comments for some of you fair folk. Some of you mentioned that A starts at $45.65K plus commission. That's what I got wrong. That's inaccurate. The job description says $90K $110 plus commission plus benefits, and $90K $110 dough. I also followed up with a recruiter and asked where we are with the next steps. She said the hiring manager is out office this week. Yeah, right, haven't heard a peep in 2 weeks. I never mentioned the job description to them because I thought they were honest. I was obviously wrong, and what would me mentioning this change with my possible manager? For him to act like I offended him, I'm wasting my breath calling him out.
I do some graphic design work, right? And I learned from a finance X that I had is that I never say how much I want. I would say how much they offer, how much they're offering, and I use that. I'll gauge it by that. Like, say for instance, if he said, because I mean, what they write sometimes, not what they want, right? So if they said, 90 to 100, okay, then I'll say 100 because it's within what they said. But if they didn't say nothing, and this is what they're saying, and if you say 100, or if you lowball yourself, those are things that could happen. So a tactic you can use is just ask what they are offering instead of telling you what you want. Because I think that helps where you're not lowballing yourself, nor you're highballing yourself. I don't know if that's the word, but yeah.
Soon after he made his dreams come true, he started spending a crazy amount of money on expensive clothing, jewelry, and cars.
I ain't got time to be playing at all.
He even spent $1,000 a week just to get a regular looking haircut.
I just paid $500 for a haircut.
Two days ago.
But this spending got out of control because in less than 8 months, Osiris had spent his whole fortune and went broke.
You blew through $1 million in 8 months.
Yeah.
And you're how old at that time?
I was 18.
To make things even worse, he owed the government $190,000 in unpaid taxes. And so he borrowed thousands of dollars from many other artists to get him out of trouble. But he didn't learn from his mistakes, and this slowly destroyed his reputation. Because despite not making money, he still had the audacity to flex stacks of cash on Instagram.
Yo, how much you got? 20!
This obviously made a lot of people who lent him money really mad, including Lil Baby, who confronted him publicly for not paying him back.
I always say that I want men to be the best version of themselves, and I don't, this is my way where I think this is what I believe every man should invest. No matter what skin color you have, no matter what age you are, I think every man, especially minorities, right? Because they, you get the system to sometimes be against you. You don't gain that knowledge in school and stuff like that, nor from your parents. So I definitely believe minorities should invest, but I believe all men should invest. And I'm talking about long-term investing. I'm not talking about trading, buying something, selling it, stuff like that, trying to time the stock market, because when you do that, that's when you hit the part where you're gambling, right? You're hoping that, you buy an Apple stock today and hope tomorrow, next week, it will double your money. But you don't know what will happen next week. But you buy Apple stock today. In 10 weeks, there is a high probability that Apple will either still do well or they will do amazing. It's a high probability. There's a higher chance where you can predict that, this is a strong company. So I can't see if they continue on their path, what they've been showing in their past and present, that in their future, they will most likely continue with their success. This is where you take, all the information that you perceive from the company into account. So that's just an example of a company. But I still believe if you invest in good, stable companies and invest in the long term, you can use it like a savings account, a high yield saving account. And this is a way for you to build wealth. I'm not saying get rich, because I don't believe every man, especially the average man, needs to be wealthy, needs to be rich. But he has to have, certain things to add to his own individual net worth to, help with his life. So one thing is you could buy properties. I definitely say that, but I believe, buying properties, you have to go through a lot of loopholes or, hoops, to go through a lot of hoops. And sometimes, or most of the times, you have to have a good amount of capital, right? Upfront capital when it comes to properties. So personally, that's why I invest in stocks, because you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't. And this portfolio that I'm showing you right now, I've been contributing about $50 every week for the last about 3 years or so, probably a little bit like 3 years plus. And it's grown to this amount. It's not a lot, but I don't think it's a little personally, right? Because again, I'm not looking to get rich or turn this into a six-figure, position or whatever. I'm looking to see my money grow as time goes on, instead of just having money just lay in my, under my bed, right? Or in a bank account, and have it not grow or be, devalued by deflation, right? So I'd rather have it grow along with these strong companies, these growing companies. Now, nothing is 100%, right? Nothing is 100%. That's why this is not financial advice, really. I'm not telling you what companies to buy. I'm telling you that you should invest for the long term. Long term, I'm talking about 5-10 years, even more. You could, right? This portfolio, I'm hoping that it's a dividend portfolio. I could explain more if you guys want in the future, but this is a dividend portfolio that I'm hoping I can grow. So this portfolio I could pass down to future generations, right? So I'm hoping that this portfolio can become a generational wealth kind of thing. That's what I'm hoping for, right? So this is what I will put in my will, and what I would pass down to my kids, and hopefully I put in my will, and this will pass down to future generations. That's my main goal. But I want to show that I have this as part of my assets, right? I think every man should have assets, things under his name that brings value to him, right? So I think it's very important. And like I said, this is not about how much you put in, but it's about consistency. Every week, nonstop, right? For the last couple years, I put in $50. You can put in how much you want, but it's about consistency, okay? That's where you're building this snowball effect by constantly buying. And, if you see things dip, they go lower, buy more or whatever, just constantly buying to build up this portfolio for the long term. So, yeah, I think every man should invest.
Housing security in the U.S. since the pandemic is on track to become a crisis, and Black women are being affected the most by it. According to Eviction Lab, there were more than 434,000 evictions last year. So for some context to this, the eviction moratorium was in place for a large portion of the year, but the number of renters at risk of eviction as of January spiked to about 3 million and counting. And of those, Black women have the highest average of eviction filed against them at 6.2%, compared to white women at 3.4%. Now, that equates to 1 in 4 Black renters living in a place where Black eviction filing rates were almost double than that of their white counterparts. So joining us now is Akira Drake Rodriguez. She's an assistant professor of city and regional planning at the Stuart Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also the author of Diverging Space for Deviance, the Politics of Atlanta's Public Housing. Professor Drake, great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. So can you give us an idea of why evictions are so high for Black women specifically and the short and long-term impact it's having on them and their families?
Sure. So Black women traditionally are tasked with a lot of the caretaking roles of both their immediate family, but also their extended family. And so what you're more likely to see is that these are the women who are going to be having to take in cousins, having to take in people who are experiencing their own economic precarity or housing precarity, in addition to their own families. As sort of the head caretakers, you also see that they're more likely to make these sorts of sacrifices. So you see Black women, and all women actually, but Black women in particular, because they have kind of less opportunity and less access, more likely to stay, for example, in substandard housing or expensive housing if it means that their child has access to a good school or they have access to a job opportunity. And so you kind of create these sort of cascading problems and issues when it comes to evictions, and that they are more likely to lose their job. They are more likely to have to travel further for work, increasing their economic precarity, and more likely to be the caretaker and taking on a lot of additional families into their household. So getting this eviction is this very sort of permanent stain on their record. It impacts their credit. It impacts their ability to find more housing. A lot of these Black women are more likely to experience bouts of homelessness as a result of these evictions. Their credit is less likely to remain intact after having some of these housing issues. So it's really, when we talk about intersectionality, it really is a prime example of how intersectionality works, right? They are less likely to be employed. They are making lower wages. They are in these substandard housing units. And these impacts are huge. As you can see, the psychological trauma, the difficulty, and, imagine getting turned down for housing opportunity after housing opportunity, economic opportunity. It can really, really start to have an impact on their mental health as well.
Sure. And their families as well, because I imagine they are also more likely to have children in tow, correct?
For sure. Yes, this is a very difficult problem.
So, Professor, according to that report by Eviction Lab that we talked about earlier, women in general are evicted more than men. So how do you think the Department of Housing and Urban Development could be, addressing this issue, especially for Black women, but for women in general?
I think it's really important to know about these causes of higher rates of eviction and really thinking about the full package that is required to house someone. It is not just the provision of a voucher. It's not just the provision of a subsidy. It is not just the provision of a single unit. It really is this sort of bundle of care, of transportation, of mental health supports, of physical health supports, the ability to have flexible housing. So often you are allotted housing based on the number of dependents you have, and people can wait on very long waiting lists, and suddenly the housing they're allotted is pretty much obsolete to their needs. So having responsive, flexible housing, having the wraparound services, which HUD does, they do a lot of social service wraparound support, but it needs to be so much more, particularly as the department does much more with vouchers and mobility solutions that place people out of their kinship networks and place people out of where they have their home base and their sort of support network. Those are the things that really make housing a home. And I think the more that HUD sort of understands that full bundle of what is needed to house someone properly, that will help with the solutions.
And Professor, what advice do you have for anyone who may be watching right now and facing eviction and not sure what to do? What resources could you point them to?
Definitely look into your local tenant association, look into your local fair housing center so they can provide you with the legal advice that is needed and connect you with the services and support that is available. There has been usually, if you kind of look into the eviction subsidies and moratoriums, there were usually nonprofits that were allocated and tasked with that. And there was a lot of capacity and institution building around sort of eviction prevention. And so definitely mobilizing and organizing, I think, is really critical. I think a lot of people feel alone in these and embarrassed about being evicted. And being in tenant associations, working with these resources and networks that were established when so many were facing eviction and before that foreclosure, I think is really important, again, with that mental health and that weathering that occurs. So really sort of being in community with others is really important at this time.
All right, Professor Akira Drake Rodriguez, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you so much.